through enhanced insulation, efficient HVAC system, renewable energy integrations, and water-saving fixtures, retrofitting can transform these spaces into resilient, energy-efficient assets. This session is aimed to equip us with the practical insights and tools for achieving this transition. Now I take the privilege to introduce the chair of the session, Ms. Vaishnavi T.G. Shankar. She's the lead in Climate Center of Cities at National Institute of Urban Affairs. Ma'am, please come on the stage and be seated. Have a great round of applause for ma'am, please. She's a scholar with 13 years of expertise in urban climate governance, resilient strategy, capacity building, driving low carbon and resilient urban development across Southeast Asia. Talking about our panelists now, we are fortunate to have a distinguished panel with us today comprising Mr. Sudhir Perla, Managing Director and Country Manager, Tabrid Asia. Please, sir, come on the stage. Mr. Sudhir is an innovator in district cooling and cooling as a service. Ms. Perla leads Tabrid efforts in India and Southeast Asia, contributing to sustainable urban cooling solutions. Now we have with us architect Shamit Manchanda, founding partner and principal architect at Manchanda Associates. Thank you for being here with us, sir. He is a visionary in healthcare architecture and an active contributor to urban planning and policy discussions. Now we have with us Ms. Nandita Bhatt, Executive Director at Airport Authority of India. Ms. Nandita Bhatt is one of the 51 women who had privilege to interact with President of India as a part of Women Aviation Achievers Initiative. We welcome you, ma'am. Now we have with us Ms. Shamita M., Managing Director, Ella Green Building Infrastructure Consultant. Ma'am, please come on the stage. Ms. Shamita is a sustainability advocate and has trained thousands in energy efficiency and consulted over 1,000 green buildings projects. A very warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists. With further ado, I would like to now invite Ms. Vaishnavi to lead this thought-provoking session. Over to you, ma'am.
I don't think this is working. It's working, okay. Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this thematic track on elevating existing buildings for sustainability. It's a pleasure to address this critical topic, especially when we are digesting the outcomes of COP29 recently. So the summit, of course, had quite a focus on finance, but for the first time, the UNFCCC negotiations also focused and acknowledged the importance of building sector in achieving the climate targets. Particularly the Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation Ambition and Implementation Work Program looked at a couple of priority areas which aligns with the discussion today. One is reducing operational emissions through efficient heating, cooling and appliances, enhancing energy efficiency in building envelopes for both new constructions and existing retrofits, and addressing the embodied carbon in building materials. I know we're all converts here. There's no need to mention that, to achieve the 1.5 degree target, it's not possible without accelerating climate action in the building sector. In India, of course, the scenario is not any different. The buildings contribute to 40% of the country's energy consumption, and there's a growing, it's also increasing 8% annually. So with the increase in urbanization, the demand for electricity also is going to be tripling, making the building sector a key focus if we have to achieve the climate targets. And at the global level, the operational emissions from buildings have continued. It's been increasing at an average of 1% annually between 2015 and 2021, despite the global commitments to reduce this by 2030. Just one other important point from the India's perspective is the submission that we made to UNFCCC in 2022 highlighted, I'm going to quote this, which is climate responsive and resilient building design, construction and operation in existing and future buildings as one of the key elements for the long-term low-carbon growth strategy for the country. So we've definitely acknowledged, and I mean, there's quite a bit of work that has happened. But in today's discussion, we're going to focus on zero it on the retrofitting of the existing buildings. And we're going to look at what policy, financial, and technical barriers exist in hindering this large-scale retrofit efforts, and what the examples are there in the country for such projects, and what the recommendations could be to accelerate this. I have to mention to you all that I'm filling in for Dr. Debolina Kundu, so I'm going to try my best to make this discussion as engaging as possible and get the best out of our speakers. So we have an exceptional panel. We have speakers ranging from design to innovation, from policy to governance and the private sector practice. So I'm going to turn to our speakers and request everyone to share your insights and the proposed solutions, say like in 7 to 8 minutes. So I'll probably start with Mr. Sudhir Parla. So given the cooling accounts for 60% of the energy requirements in commercial buildings, what do you see as the current challenge, or rather the opportunity where we can elevate the existing buildings for sustainability in design and even most importantly in the operation, because that's in the existing buildings, that's an important standpoint. And maybe from your experience, if you'd give us some examples of emerging technologies of how they have been used in the buildings, I think we can start off with your thoughts on that end.
Yeah, thanks Vaishnavi for that. And maybe can I put some slides? Actually, it's a great question, so I can just probably walk through some of them and then open up after that. Yeah. Okay. And what I do is, because again, when you're talking buildings, it's quite diverse, right? So probably I'll just try focus on just the commercial buildings, which are all mostly green building certified. So we would imagine them to be, of course, far more energy efficient compared to other buildings. Yes, what we have here, I think the slide is a little busy, but the slide kind of shows the grade A commercial office buildings in some of the key cities in India, just focusing on what we right now see to be probably one of the most energy efficient buildings being designed and built and operated right now in the country. So at this point of time, if you look at the three metros and also cities like Hyderabad, Pune and Bangalore, the focusing again on HVAC and how that plays into energy efficiency, there's about 2.5 million tons of HVAC equipment already installed and operational in a variety of grade A and B buildings across the country. Like for example, in BKC in Bombay, you have Cyber City in Delhi and Gurgaon and so on. So about 2.5 million tons. With upcoming supply in the next 5 years, another 3 million tons is going to be added. So you're going to be having about 5.5 to 5.8 million tons of cooling capacity in all these buildings. These are all, of course, mostly water-cooled chillers, energy efficient, and so on. CapEx being spent by developers is roughly in the range of 4.4 billion so far, another 5 billion plus, about $10 billion just for cooling alone. And India already is a global leader with about 45% of all LEED net zero certified projects in the country. We have, of course, seen a huge increase in green buildings as well, 5x plus increase in the past decade. And of course, the private sector is taking the lead given the increasing focus on ESG and so on and so forth. But where we still see challenges despite them being designed well is essentially around the design vision not translating into the desired results on the ground, along in terms of how the buildings are being commissioned, operated and maintained. And that comes, and there are a number of challenges and opportunities per se for the commercial building space, right? I mean, first is the market practice. Like I said, I mean, typically a consultant designs the building and someone else builds it. So the design risk is not borne by the consultants. Facility management companies have very short-term contracts, so they always focus on cost, and as a result of which there are a lot of corners that are cut. OEMs who supply equipment are incentivized to, of course, have higher revenues through AMCs. And the market construct per se basically prevents a lot of things that could be done to kind of come into practice. Currently, we did an estimate across these green buildings across India. The energy consumption for cooling alone is about 80 million megawatt hours annually, with an associated CO2 emissions of about 4.3 million tons. This is on the basis that a lot of them secure green power using PPAs in place and so on, so it's still about 4 million tons. What is not being focused on is refrigerants. I think basically that's something which nobody talks about so far in the overall sustainability conversations and so on. And GWP, the current ones that are used in the market right now, have 2,000 times, and 2,000 times more potent than CO2. And currently, from our estimates, because of leaks and mismanagement, and because refrigerants are mispriced, you're seeing close to 2.8 million tons of CO2 equivalent being emitted each year. And you also have a situation where a lot of the equipment is aging right now, 15 plus years old, which needs retrofits from time to time, where in total there's a $4 to $7 billion investment required for retrofits, right? So this is just the market context. And what, yeah, models that could apply to make this, to elevate, enhance sustainability in these buildings essentially is around, instead of the current fragmented approach of somebody designing, somebody commissioning, somebody operating, and somebody maintaining them, you could actually look at models of cooling as a service, where providers, for example, like and there are multiple players in the market already, like the Breathe, where it's mostly technology agnostic, OEM agnostic, where solutions are offered to essentially sign 20 to 30 year contracts to essentially take over the existing HVAC infrastructure, optimize them, retrofit them, and then give commitments on a long-term basis for service reliability and on KPIs and so on. And taking a more life cycle approach vis-a-vis design, build, and OpEx approach to then translate into essentially achieving both cost savings as well as energy efficiency and refrigerant management as well, right? And as an example, I'll just talk through one specific case study of which might just help put things in perspective, where Tata Realty, who have a commercial complex in Gurgaon, they signed a 30-year contract with us, with the Breathe, where it already was LEED Platinum certified, so of course it already is extremely energy efficient, 3.5 million square feet, where the assets were transferred to the Breathe, both the high side and the low side cooling assets, and under a 30-year contract structure. And I think as a part of the contract, what we implemented to retrofit them was a combination of passive and also long-term approaches. So on the design side, of course, I think we all know that, I mean, from a building design standpoint, you can have a whole lot of green building measures, like insulated building envelope and glazing and for the facade, I mean, minimum glazing and facade and so on and so forth. But I think a lot of interventions were put in within the building side for the new ones that are being constructed, like radiant cooling, for example, to reduce the amount of heat gain and mechanical load required, outdoor air systems to reduce the amount of, again, the latent load required for cooling, a whole lot of technologies and solutions that are far more energy efficient compared to what is currently there in the market right now, a high degree of automation as well, and also managing aspects around waste and sewage to ensure that from a design standpoint, you incorporate what all could be done upfront to achieve, at least ensure that the buildings are designed for more sustainability. Here again, I think when a third-party provider comes not just to give inputs on design, but also takes responsibility to implement them, then the onus of ensuring that the solution works is on them. And that's where I feel models like cooling as a service come into, are beneficial compared to just somebody just designing them. And the O&M approach here is basically, it's a KPI-linked SLAs for cooling services, so long-term efficiency commitments for 30 years. It's not just somebody just saying, I'll build this plant, but basically 30 years guaranteeing efficiency, uptime, predictability, a lot of focus on reliability of the systems as well, and ensuring that whatever the design intent is can be achieved in practice from a sustainability standpoint, right? So I wanted to focus not just on the design part, but also on the operations part, because that's what we tend to miss in most of the conversations. And why Tata wanted to work with us is because as a company, we are global. We're there in about 28 plus countries. We provide cooling as a service for about 475 million square feet of built up area across all types of buildings, from malls to airports to residential buildings to commercial buildings and so on and so forth. So when you have an organized utility approaching something like cooling within commercial buildings in a more holistic way, you could achieve more sustainability through retrofits as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back with a couple of questions, but I'll get the first reflections from all the speakers here. I'll move to architect Manchanda, because so you did mention about design to some extent. Sir, for you, with increasing need to reduce the carbon footprint in the building, what principles do you prioritize, when design principles that you prioritize when retrofitting existing buildings to make them more sustainable? I think new buildings is easy and straightforward to understand, but design for the retrofit existing buildings is very challenging. And if you have any specific case studies or projects you would like to share, that will also be very helpful.
Good afternoon, everybody. Post-launch is, I think, one of the most sustainable sessions because everybody is in a low energy mode. You don't need to do much to bring down the energy further. Anyway, huge number of buildings have already been built before any green rating came into place, and a larger number of buildings are yet to be built. So, as everybody knows, building construction contributes to the maximum amount of energy consumption and carbon footprint. The very concept that we are thinking of retrofitting than demolishing is itself it's a sustainable concept, because we have taken a decision to reduce the impact on the environment. So retrofitting, because demolition is not an option, or demolition should not be an option. Traditionally, our buildings have been quite energy efficient. If you go back to say 300, 400 years ago, and even if you talk about the principles of Vastu, it talks about having a courtyard with nothing being built in the center of the house. If you look at it scientifically, it's creating a microclimatic atmosphere. The hot air in the courtyard rises, it pulls the air from the rooms, it is creating a current, it is pulling air from the shaded streets around. So we have already always been in a sustainably being built environment, something that has been ingrained into our psyche. But still, a lot of buildings need, especially the buildings which have been built in the last 40, 50 years, with the concept of green rating was not there. So those are the buildings that need to be taken care of. I have also been a proponent, and I've always said that any good architect who has, or any architect is taught climatology, sustainability in colleges. And even if I go back to my old buildings 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we used to have double walls, we used to have orientation kept in mind when the building was being built. We had kept, I remember we did a hospital project in Delhi where we used something called light shelves. Simple concept, the chhaja on top of the window, we had a ventilator, the chhaja and the window. On top of the chhaja we put glazed tiles, so the light coming onto the chhaja would bounce into the room, thereby reducing the lighting requirement in the building. This is 80s when there was no concept of green rating. We used water recycling, we used dual piping system. So even if I go back to my building and try and apply for a green rating, without any intervention, I would still get maybe a 2-star or a 3-star building. So that said, in terms of retrofitting, the first and foremost thing that you need to do is to do an assessment of where the energy efficiency lacks. So once you have identified those areas, then we need to look at how can we bring in systems that will bring down your energy consumption in terms of using solar or renewable energy. Solar can be in terms of solar photovoltaics, solar water heating, and now a big stress is on BIPV panels, building integrated photovoltaic systems. Those can be brought in, making buildings more electrically, use of reduction in water consumption, rainwater harvesting, dual piping system, recycled water. Using many buildings go in for facade upliftment. So You have products today which are being used as insulating from the outer surface. You're using shading devices. So these are certain areas which can be brought in. And building automation, using smart technologies, these are another option that can be utilized. Making the clients aware of the incentives that are available in terms of, even at the small scale, like Delhi government makes it free for electricity beyond a certain number of units, so that is an incentive to use even more electricity, even more energy efficient use of electricity so that the bill comes down. Similarly for water. And another aspect which actually needs to be pushed at the policy level is the use of additional FAR which is being granted for building construction. I believe the policies are there, at least in Delhi it has not been implemented. The policy exists on paper. We are fighting a case at the moment where additional FAR is not being granted because of various reasons, though the policy exists. There are limitations in terms of structural limitations when we do retrofitting. There are limitations in terms of cost, because cost is something that the client may or may not be ready to bear, because these become capital intensive things. But at the end of the day, the impact, it enhances occupant comfort, health, productivity, with better air quality, lighting and thermal comfort. So these are certain things that have to be kept in mind while doing retrofitting and elevating these buildings for sustainability.
Thank you.
Okay, you had a second part of the question about...
If you could share some examples.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was this project of a hospital which was already existing, and it had a large floor plate. It was in a place called Jorhat, and where electricity itself was a problem, continuous electricity, and it would go on for so many hours that the diesel supply would wean off, and you would have even the DG sets going off. Being a large floor plate meant that there were a lot of rooms which had no natural light or ventilation. So what we did was we brought in, we demolished parts of the building so that courtyards could be created in the existing system, so that natural light and ventilation could be brought into almost all the rooms. And that way the productivity, the quality of life and health of the people working there improved drastically. Plus additional things like adding solar panels, which are more common, but getting to convince the client that he needs to demolish a newly constructed building was a big challenge at that stage.
Great, thank you for that example. So I'm going to move on to Ms. Nandita, but we spoke about the commercial space, we spoke about the residences, so maybe we could try and understand a little bit more as to what the Airports Authority of India is working on, because airports are existing infrastructure with specific operational and safety requirements in the place as well for these buildings. So if you could maybe share some thoughts and maybe successful initiatives that have been taken up by the authority to look at these buildings.
Yeah, namaskar. I think Mr. Manchanda has actually put on some points which as an architect is something we all work on. But I come from an industry which works very different. We are expected to be most glamorous when you walk in the airport, and you want everything running perfect as a 5-star or a 7-star resort that they call for. But when we're working at the airport, people forget that there's a lot that goes behind the scene. The green rooms for us are much different. They're sustainable to a next level. We have to work with a lot of regulations. We are under the command of a lot of regulatory requirements that we have to fulfill. So one of the major parts that we find difficult is that how to stop operations of a particular building, or how to phase it out if we need to retrofit. You can't stop operations. We have to be very careful about that. And our regulations for every step that you walk in from the door entry is regulated. So if I have to say that my doors have to be retrofitted with the kind of equipment or any other extra where my HVAC loss is less, I need to know that my scanners for the people to enter are not fiddled across with it, because those are all inspected and put it across. So one of the major issues that we face when we work to retrofit our old airports is actually our operational requirements and the regulatory, which is important. We are also bound by the UN body, which is IQ, International Civil Aviation, and we are expecting that by 2030, India is also going to be one of the part where we need to be, having airports which should be zero carbon emission. So we're really trying very hard to see that where all we work through. Another challenge for us is we work across the country. It's not just one particular state that we are in. We are from north, south, east, west to northeast, and the climatic condition of each challenge and an operation. So you need to be knowing that each building will have its own customized retrofitting. It cannot be universal across. It cannot be. And that's something which becomes a challenge, because some buildings are very small, some are very large. And henceforth comes our next step into it, which is the cost and the budget. Of course, we do build in and we see, but then we cannot go overboard, because our operational expenditure levels as such are very high. And as they say, airports are actually white elephants. They're there in the room. It's easy to build and say, have them the fanciest. You're the landmark of your particular city. People really correlate themselves with the airport in the cities. But the problem is maintaining them is very important. As I was speaking earlier with some of my panelists and was telling them that our regulatory requirement across the board, maybe it's an airport with one flight or maybe it's airport with 100 flight, is same. You cannot compromise in even a single point onto that. So that actually becomes a very heavy load on us to ensure that nothing goes amiss while you're retrofitting in those regulations. Another very important aspect we talk is the safety part of it. That's our motto when we work in aviation, please. We want all of you to land safe and take off and reach your destination safer. Safety is a very sensitive point for us. So when people sometimes ask, you have so much of an area to put solar panels. You find when you land next to the airport, there is a huge basic strip on both the sides, and you wonder what that land is meant for. Well, that land is actually meant for your safety. That's to understand that if, God forbid, your aircraft has gone off the runway, you need that kind of a 140-meter basic strip on both the sides to be safe. So you cannot have solar panels there. 2, solar panels have the glares. So we need to be very careful in our property at airports. We sometimes can't even use our roofs for putting solar panels because of the glare factor. So these are some of the small issues which may not just walk through you when you're sitting across, but they're very sensitive. Next comes is the security part of it. Are you putting any kind of an equipment where people can use that particular equipment as a hazard for the security? We need to be very careful, though we are under the screeners of CCTV and everything, but nothing that should become a hazard for you. Next is, be very careful when you're putting your retrofitting, is that your fire regulations are not tampered with. Because that's something which again is an issue, because if we need to vacate, we have a huge protocol when it comes to aviation. How are we going to be vacating people who are already in security hold to air side and who are towards the city side? And then of course, some of the cities have their own environmental clearances, which I have seen. And we have some very old buildings which also have the complexity of the existing systems and designs. They may not be compatible with what we are coming up with the new technology. And sometimes changing the whole system is just not feasible because of the time that we don't have in our hand. Just as an example, you may be wanting to change some of your duct systems or firefighting systems or add in some more cooling systems. With a running airport, trying to remove a whole complete false ceiling to retrofit something on the top is something like next to impossible for us. Though we do try and do that with the phasing that we go across. So these are some of the major things. And last not the least, I always say passenger comfort and experience. One day if you'll go without an AC at an airport, I'm sure all your Twitters are going to just be on in a second. And that'll be meant us answering from any parliament to any other question that will come forth. So sometimes that's a bigger challenge for us. We can manage the rest, but it's very difficult for, I think, people like you to be managed for us. That's one of the most difficult points that we face. So retrofitting is not that we are not getting into airports, but these are some of the complexities that we really run. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for, this is, of course, a very complex sort of an issue. I've traveled in Terminal 1 a couple of times and complained myself, I mean, not because of any inconvenience, but because of the ongoing work that's happening, right? So, yeah, I get all the points. So, I come to Ms. Samita. I hope, I'm hoping that you can capture all of these discussions to like highlight what have you observed as a trend in retrofitting existing buildings, and maybe particularly green buildings, if you can maybe speak about. Architect Manchanda did mention about it, but if you can maybe highlight a little bit on the trend, because I think in ELA green buildings, you all do work extensively on these spaces, and if you could also maybe highlight an example of how this has increased the overall building performance.
So, a very good afternoon to all of you here. Interestingly, this whole concept of green buildings, as rather the certification systems and therefore certifying it green, has been here since the early 2000s. The focus has largely been on new buildings when it started. But I don't know, I think it's post the pandemic that I'm actually seeing a lot of focus on existing buildings. So maybe that's the realization that we're all sitting in a building for a large part of time, either it's your home or office, and the need for, measures that can actually provide occupant health and comfort. So while we're looking at, minimizing resources, and, we were talking about, I think Mr. Padla has already spoken about how we can, maximize efficiency and in design parameters. The focus has been on both parameters, where we're looking at demand-side HVAC management. How do we minimize energy efficiency? Maximize energy efficiency, reduce the numbers. So we've done some projects on that front. Water has been a very important parameter, how we can, because that's easy, it doesn't require a lot of changing of the system, like you said, no air conditioning or changing the building envelope. So these are smaller measures where we have seen a lot of savings in water and a lot of savings in energy equipment, like lighting. There have been buildings where we've converted the entire building to LEDs, and we've seen a sizable difference in that. I'll talk about the case studies. But a very important trend has been on the focus on occupant health and comfort. How do we make sure that there is enough daylighting in existing buildings, in the existing building stock? How do we bring in, thermal comfort? Are the occupants actually comfortable? Are there monitors? Are there sensors? Are there any measurement and verification systems that exist? So that leads us to the next important factor in existing buildings, where how do we monitor the performance of these buildings, right from energy, water, as well as occupant comfort controls. So this is where using monitoring through probably about 5 years ago, their design was to about 100 EPI, right? So 100 kilowatt hours per square meter of per year. But when we went back, of course, they did a lot of additions, solar was added later, things like that. Now they are, and also how they operate their building, And now if we see, their operational EPI is 40 or 41. So you see the drastic reduction, which is like literally more than 50% reduction from what was designed to what is being done. And similarly, water also. They had installed complete water aerators for their entire, requirement in their toilets. And from 75 liters per day per square feet, their operational was 25 liters per day per square feet. So again, you see it's 65 odd % reduction in that. So yes, having worked on these large projects across different industries, we've realized that there has been, a drastic focus on how do we maximize efficiency and how do we also focus on, well-being, human comfort. Because now many buildings are installing humidity sensors, are installing temperature sensors. How can we address the people comfort? So that is becoming important parameter as we look at existing buildings.
Thank you, Ms. Samita. I'm going to invite Mr. Arun Tripathi, who is the senior scientist from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, to join us. So if you could just join us and give a thematic address of the discussions that's been happening.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to apologize for being late because of unexpected something, it happens in the offices and all. So I could listen to the airport authorities' concern. I could listen to the Samita madam's concern. And these are certainly the matter of concern. But I would like to give you some solution for that. The first solution, which is going to be that you can, even without installation, you can make your building green. That is due to the regulation which is in vogue right now, open access system. In open access system, and there are examples also I would like to give. Suppose and this needs at least 100 kilowatt and plus. I think in such a commercial installations, 100 kilowatt is nothing. So there is a regulation which says that if you have a connected load of 100 kilowatt plus, you can have directly PPA with the green power plants producing renewable energy or green power, basically the wind and solar. The burning example is the metro, Delhi Metro. Delhi Metro has a PPA with a power plant set up in Rewa. It's a 750 megawatt solar power plants, and they have made a PPA with them. They purchase electricity, green electricity from them. So now, this is basically netting your units. If you spend, you have the consumption of say 5,000 units, I'm just example like X figure, and you can purchase these 5,000 units from those green power plants. There are ample of power plants available. They are being set up all over the country also. So without installation at your site, which is difficult in some establishment like airport and buildings and so on, so you can make it completely green. So that is the easiest way from solar plants, including all the cost of billing, banking and so many things. And in fact, billing and banking has been made free also till 2025, and it is going to be extended further also. So there are no wheeling charges, there are no banking charges, and you can make the purchase from them. So you can proudly say that out of, like Sial Airport, madam, that is the icon for the world, 100% green airport. They claim to be, I had a figure of 3-4 years back, these 48 lakh units they use every year, and they produce more than that. So that's a net zero real airport. So it's not that you need to install at your campus. The second thing could be that the BIPVs, everybody, I think this is a new, not a new, but normally we are not giving much deserved, I would say, importance to this. I would urge all the architects who are here. Sir Manchanda ji is a very senior architect. So these architects should tell their clients that right in the beginning, if they, from the building design itself, one is by virtue of its orientation, architectural design, another by virtue of the, not retrofitting, I would say, it is made as a part of your building. And one example is our own ministry's building. I would invite everybody to come and see that. We have a 1 megawatt BIPV installed in that building, and we are meeting 75 to 85% of our electricity need in that huge gigantic building from solar. 75 to, and we have the month-wise data. We have based. I am telling this data based on the electricity bill. Anybody can come and see, experience that. So that was right from the beginning when the building was conceptualized. We wanted it to be a green building. We wanted a net zero 100% green building, but we have reached to certain level. In few months, 2-3 months are there where we have 107% production than the consumption. And of course, it has a different HVAC radiant cooling system and all modern systems. So any new building which is coming up should see their long-term energy consumption. That is very, very important thing. Electricity is going to be expensive. It's not going to be so cheaper. It can never, like a gold, it can never come down. So electricity is going to be expensive, and we should be making the efforts right from the beginning. In the retrofitting building, I mean, the retrofittings have the limitations of the land, limitations of the space, cost, and everything. In that also you can have virtual net metering system. Virtual net metering means you can install it in your nearby places or any other place, and you can directly buy the electricity from them. It can happen. So these are the few suggestions which I would say that direct applications for our making our building sustainably. And if you buy green power, you can become 100% net zero without any efforts, and I would say that you will be benefited. Your electricity, they have the PPA at the rate of 6 rupees, 7 rupees or so, and every commercial entity pays more than 8 rupees to 10 rupees. So that is the solution I would like to mention. I will not take much time. There are many other applications which have been developed, like solar cold storage system and solar air conditioning systems, which can be adopted in because air conditioning is one of the very big energy guzzlers. So these systems are there. They are little expensive right now, but in the long term, if you see, they have a free fuel for air conditioning. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. I'm really sorry for being late. Thank you.
Go for question and answers. Please raise your hands and the microphone will be brought to you.
Hi, my name is Parush. I'm a master's student from CEPT University. My question is to Nandita ma'am. You mentioned the challenges which are ongoing at the airport, while retrofitting or not. So what are the solutions which you are incorporating while retrofitting?
We just heard Mr. Talwar, and I wanted to pinpoint to tell. I must tell you that we already have achieved 100% renewable energy at 25 airports, which belong to AI, like Puducherry, Kanpur. So it's not just doing it there. As he said, we have other measures, and we have tried to follow that out. We also have an Airports Council International, which does global, accreditation for us. And in that, we have level 4+ for Delhi, Mumbai. We have Bangalore and GMR for 3+ neutrality. And we have level 2 for Calcutta, Bhubaneswar, Varanasi, and Trivandrum. So like in Calcutta, I may not be carrying all the figures right now, but I'll be more than happy if you come over to our office or mail. So we did a 17 MWP solar plant at Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, that's at Calcutta. So we've been doing this. Land in Leh, where actually the building was designed, the new terminal which is coming up, and we've all seen what it has been going in media, and then we had to, as they say, backtrack to see what more could be done to save the place. So we have come up with a new system, as he said, a carbon-free geothermal system. So we are actually incorporating that in our terminal building now, and that's why that little delay probably has happened for us to, put that airport to the city. We've been working on high density polythene pipes which are inserted at the depth for these kind of systems which we are getting for the thing. So retrofitting is not just exactly doing everything in totality. Of course, LED is something which is a bit more simplest. So that we all have done all across, not only at our airports, even in our campuses. See, we run huge. We just don't have airport. We have our schools. We have our residential campuses. So LED, because that was much easier to do, was the first step that was taken. And rest, we are doing a lot of work with the government of each state to ensure we are buying to become carbon neutral. So it's not must that we will go for the retrofitting 100%. We'll try and go wherever it's feasible in phase-wise and not much of an issue. Please understand, we also have some terminals which run way back, coming to us as a legacy, which could be 40 years back. Some buildings touching structurally is also not that safe that we would want to touch them now. So wherever we are going for new buildings, we are now, we were going for Griha 4 till now, but for our new terminals, we are going for Griha 5 now. So we are stepping up as per thing. But not 100% retrofitting and everything. Let's be very clear, it's very difficult.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Nandita ma'am,
Yeah.
one question to you.
Yes.
How the waste segregation is being maintained, or what is the policy adopted by AI, like Airport Authority of India, for the waste segregation, and how do you do with the segregation with the local bodies? Are you going to give it to local bodies, or AI is going to take care of that? That is.
See, we do have sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants and everything which is inbuilt into our systems. We cannot do without it because it's a large consumption. Rest, depending on the each airport, because as I told you, we work to as far as to Teju, to Barapani, to Shillong and everywhere. So depending on the each customized airport where the segregation of waste is doing, if we need help, we do get state government to come and be with us. But otherwise, see, most of the time we do have a government policies and systems in place. So you'll tender out for all these kind of systems also which run to be doing in place. But then it's all taken care of. It's not that it's just left. So water treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, most of our airports, depending on what's the kind of capacity that we run, we have it and get it done all in a house. We have, by the way, everybody would know, none of our airports are built without environmental clearances. And our system and paperwork runs very strong. We don't get an environmental clearance if we've not submitted everything and come across. And then I told you, we also have regulatory bodies. We have DGCA and BCAS and everybody in place. And all that is inbuilt in our system. So in aviation industry, be it, you cannot do without it. And by the way, we are licensed when it comes to an airport. We will not be given a license if we don't, work all these systems in place. So sometime if we ever get time and we have a chance, we'll surely try and invite people to come and see airports, which is a little difficult because of the safety measures that we do. But still, on paper, yes, we don't mind if you come to our offices and come and see the plans and understand. But otherwise, it's all in place, which you talk for. Thanks.
I have a couple of comments. Can I also say? Actually, this comes from Mr. Tripathi's comments. PIPV is still very expensive. So maybe a policy level discussion needs to be taken up in terms of how can we subsidize PIPV, because when you're doing a project for the government, it doesn't matter because the government has a policy because it needs to save energy and it will introduce this. But trying to convince a private client to go in for BIPV in place of a normal solar panel, so that is one challenge that we face in our projects. So if the ministry can take up some initiative of subsidizing the cost.
Can we get a mic to Tripathi, sir?
Yeah.
And very recently, we have allowed BIPV to be included into that.
Okay.
So that automatically qualifies for 60% subsidy.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the residential sector, if you install balcony top also, you can take it because you may have the balconies, and so if you design your balconies in such a way where in place of the normal glass. And today you have very beautiful solar panels, glass to glass panels, transparent panels, opaque panels, and there are many colored panels also. So if the builders come that they need X color, Y color, Z color, so they can get the color coated panels also. Of course, they are little expensive, not much expensive. Today solar panel is one of the cheapest thing. So it is just a matter of adopting it and using it for.
What about institutional buildings? Is that subsidies?
Societies, it is there. For
No,
societies,
I'm
it is
talking
there.
about a hospital project.
But hospitals and all, it is not there.
Yeah.
Government buildings are compulsory to do that. Now, in the government buildings, whenever you make, you can, right from the beginning, you can suggest them. And as you said, there is no fund issue in that. So please do that, because.
So we, as an architect, I'm doing hospital projects, and this
Okay.
is something where we're doing a project in Delhi itself, and our EIA clearance mandates 10% of the total electric connected load to be on renewables.
Yeah, renewables.
So this is where now the
You
client
can-
is feeling a pinch, because that is a huge amount of renewable that he has to put in, and he's not going to get any subsidy for it. So it's a private hospital. So this is where I think the subsidy must be available across the board, at least in the initial years, so that BIPV can be
That's why I call it
popularized.
for a longer, for any CNI section, we call it commercial and industrial section. Normally, the cost of solar electricity is so cheap that 2 rupees, 30 paisa, 40 paisa, and you pay 10 rupees. For commercial, you pay more than 8 to 10 rupees to 12 rupees. So it's just a matter of, it's not very, very expensive. I tell you, 20% expensive, that's all.
Okay.
Solar panel today is costing you a kilowatt system, including all inverters and everything, is costing you 40 to 45,000 rupees. And it has a payback period of, without subsidy, 4 years. With subsidy, 1.5 year
Okay.
or to 2 years. So it's, please try to use it if in your design. If you want, I can support you with some people who can,
Yeah, that would be
work
nice.
with you, and they can guide you. And you can see in European countries, they have much less solar insolation. They have much less, means we are 100%, they are 60% of us. But they go for a different kind of building design is embedded into that. And
Another comment which actually stems out of what you just said, purchasing renewable energy and utilizing it. And now this comment is for all the Griha people sitting here. We're
Yes.
doing a project in Sikkim. 100% of the energy that is getting generated in Sikkim and being used in Sikkim is renewable. So, but when I go in for this, why I said Griha people, when I go in for Griha rating, I have about 7 points for renewable energy. So they will not give me credit on that. They asked me to put additional solar panels.
I think that correction needs to be made. If you are already getting, Sikkim is the green, almost they get.
So
Because
I
of the
have-
small hydropower.
I have
and-
100% renewable energy, but I still don't get any points for that.
I think these discussions, will definitely take off from the panel. I also have a couple of questions on behavioral change and sensitization, but I'm going to keep the time in place. I'd also request, okay, we'll probably just take one last question.